The story begins with the fact that Viscount Militza and his daughter, whom marry, arrived at the palace. My father explained to the girl that she had to show herself today, because here would be her future groom, Hans. The man explained Mary in the course of some details about the guests present at the West. The girl listened carefully to his story, because when he joined the world nobles and aristocracy, she had to navigate in secular realities. Mary's attention was attracted by a white-haired young man, whom Window presented to her as Duke Leighton. And next to him was the former Duchess. The woman came from a poor kind, and was sold to the Duke's family at the expense of debt. But the fate of the girl failed. The old Duke died very early, and his young wife, younger even than his son, remained the main. The name was Wilhelmina, and it was bad in nature and a noise. Window said that the daughter had to say hello to the Duke, but she succeeded very badly. She tried to bow, but she failed to do it. The father was angry and ordered the girl to do everything as it should. What happened that no one expected? Wilhelmina took the girl by her hand and asked why she was so thin. After all, in this case, she cannot be in the cold because she will easily get cold and get sick. The Duchess reminded that she should eat something now and start recovering over time. And also to give up high heels and corset, which in her figure should not be in her wardrobe. Wilhelmina mentioned her childhood and years of life before her wedding. She was a poor family who was constantly moving in debt, and the fastest worth finding a job and help. One day, when she sat again on a favorite job, the girl realized that she was familiar to her. Suddenly, the idea of past life slept, and the fact that the memories of it could be preserved. In her past life, she was a teacher at the training center. She died at the age of 30, 2 years. It could not be called too interesting and rich, but after his death, the girl was in the fantasy of the novel. And when Wilhelmina guessed that memories from the past life can be used in this world for the good, her family was finally destroyed. It was sold as a product in the Duke's family and did not help bad money. In this world, human rights were ephemeral. No one paid attention to this. Even it was impossible to give up the right to inherit relatives or their debts. Finally, buyers came to her. The girl was sold to become the wife of the old aristocrat. The man himself experienced and buried 4 previous women. From this day, Wilhelmina will bear the name of the famous Leniton. The poor bride did not want to live with aristocrat. She even first thought about what to escape. But such an influential cut can find it in a minute and then punish it. At the gate, she was met by a servant who reported that the owner had died. He ended yesterday in the evening. But despite the fact that they did not have time to hold the ceremony, Wilhelmine should be present at the burial ceremony. The girl was surprised because she became so quickly a widow. But her presence in the house now did not pay attention. Everyone was preparing for the funeral, and the young mistress did not worry them at all or at all. 2 months later, the young mistress spoke to the servant. The girl asked in the lady whether she was not planning to return to breakfast with the son of her late husband, but Wilhelmina assured that she likes it. The lady asked the girl whether she had important things in the main home today, but she answered. Wilhelmina released the girl. Today she could be free and do her business. At first glance, it could look like the care of their servants and a loyal attitude towards them. However, the new mistress was very better, so she often released a servant in her business. She liked the rich life. After all, there were no debts and any obligations. Wilhelmine even thought of staying in this house for always. But there was one unpleasant moment. It seemed to her that her family members would be thrown away from here. After all, no one wants to live with a widow with which no one has even spoke with one word except her personal service and the obligation. But despite this, a certain amount of money will be. And the girl no longer wants to live a poor life. It was worth trying to open your own business. Or go on a journey, as she always wanted to do it. The butterflies went to the room and reported that the girl wanted to see his son's son of the deceased. Wilhelmine was worried. What could happen to be called to herself during all this time? But you cannot refuse. The man added that this would have a great impact on her life. The girl was angry with him because she did not know about it. The servant allowed himself to remind himself that it is worth going to the main house right now. Soon they were already walking the corridor. The Bogretsky emphasized that the Duchess wants the girl in her presence to follow the manners and in her own language. Wilhelmina understood the hint of it. The girl guessed that the visit itself and this strange order of the Duchess meant that the girl had to know her place. Although Wilhelmine herself was higher in status, she had to listen. The Duchess was very serious about the hierarchy, so it is worth treating it as it really was. Wilhelmina had to play the role of her mother, in law, and behave and speak according to her status. Helen von Leeten was already waiting for the girl in her room. The glory of the Duchess was spread by the whole continent, and many called it the Pearl of the West for her beauty and manners to behave and talk. It was immediately apparent that this lady discipline was much more important than ordinary human respect and relationships. So when Wilhelmina entered the room, the Duchess called her mother. The girl worshipped Wilhelmine, but her facial expression did not indicate that she respects the guest and would try to make friends with her. Attack herself was strange to hear such an appeal to himself. Helen suggested that the girl sit down and talk a little. It was not usual for Wilhelmina to play the role of a mother, in law, to which they turn in a similar way. But you can't give up. The Duchess of Lelleton was from the imperial family. The same respect for the hierarchy and ceremonial was in her blood from birth. She immediately took the initiative for orders to the servants. The mother, in-law, immediately remembered that Helen was often set as an example for imitation of all girls from the aristocrats and nobility, but now she tried to have a more human and peaceful look. The conversation flowed slowly and leisurely. The Duchess was justified by the fact that she could not visit the widow earlier, because she had too many things and tired. The girl was indifferent and still. But suddenly the conversation touched the question of what to talk about the future. The Duchess reported that her husband decided to accept the girl for the Duke Leighton. For Wilhelmina, this was a shock. From the very beginning, she was convinced that she would just be put out the door. But Helen continued to tell. Her husband wished that after entering the kind, the girl participated in points and called evenings. Although the former poor man did not understand anything in secular life, the girl understood it is so important to participate in all New Year's and post afternoons, but its appearance could be the source of gossip. In addition, an important guest will come to visit, which the Duke's family speaks with respect and delight. The same is a very important person, and you need to prepare as much as possible. Wilhelmine wanted to ask whether the Leighton family understood the seriousness of the situation and the consequences that they would bring it to their own kind. It could not be that they just took it from kindness. At the same time, she will receive serious powers because she has the status of mother-in-law and mother of the entire duchy, and they do not do this from kindness because it is a very serious step from your new relatives. The Leighton family was one of the 2 dukes in the state, so it could not mean that they would just take the nobleman to their clan, and the only one who could press this family was personally the emperor. When Wilhelmina asked openly, her daughter-in-law squeezed. The girl guessed about the emperor. Now you should spread your success and show that it is also not a simple dough. If the memory did not betray the girl, then the emperor went down to the throne only last year, and not yet very boiling water among all palace gossip and the designs of aristocrats. More ruler is prone to the eastern regions, and the genus of Leightons was a clan from the western lands. They opposed the east during the ascent of the emperor to the peaks of power. The same could get into his disgrace. But Helen was the daughter of the former empress. She gave birth to the current emperor and Helen, and died. The current ruler dropped from the throne of the hereditary prince and took his place. The same Helen and the genus of Letton could be regarded as political opponents. But the House of Leighton was also not simple. He had a lot of possessions, economically independent and supported by the Allies' military force, and he had a powerful influence on the political arena of the continent and the empire. The emperor simply could not touch them immediately after he received power, but it was probably a matter of time. To blame the Lelleton family or start intrigue against them would be a mistake and a risky business. But her husband's death was confused with cards. The Allies feared that without the old duke, their plan became impossible, and the deck could even stand on the side of the enemy and hand over their accomplices yesterday. The death of the duke, who had survived 4 women before, was from the very beginning a strange business that made many people think about whether it was the case of the high ruler's hands who had pierced the defense of Lettoni. The emperor had perfectly owned information about who had a generic, and only he could now intervene and make Leightons to officially recognize the mother of the genus, the wife of the late duke. This can be used. The same Helen and her husband decided that it would be easier to leave Wilhelmina and recognize her than His Majesty would personally intervene in it. In this way, they saved the whole genus in a wonderful way. Even if the emperor did not personally press on them now, they will decide on their own so that the ruler has no reason to interfere with the internal affairs of the Latin family to strengthen their positions. It was the fact that the Lytton's house is now very sensitive to the political battles of the continent. The same Wilhelmina cannot be expelled from this house from now on, and her person will be protected and protected. The girl realized that she really became the subject of political intrigue, but this provided that she would live very well and under the protection of the emperor who does not even know about her protectorate. But Wilhelmina noted that there was one point. It does not have the worthy rules of etiquette. The same in front of all the techniques of the girl needs to learn everything that the aristocrat and nobleman should know. She added that she did not have a worthy dress for a visit or to visit someone, and to become a smile because of such a trifle, it would be very inadvertent and stupid. Wilhelmina asked a tone that did not need to add something more so that the girl would go and drink jewelry and dress for her. Helen humbly agreed, though she did not like the tone of the new mother of the genus. But the mother-in-law was not going to calm down. She also added warm clothes to the list to buy before the cold. Helen replied that right now she would call the shoemaker to provide services. Wilhelm also added that you need to sew clothes for servants. After all, they all went in old clothes. There will be a lot of work in Shui. But she had from Mrs. Duchess herself. All her requests and orders ended. Now it is necessary to look at what speed the servants will work and how much they will respect it, and comply with the orders of a new mistress. Helen had a rather surprised look. She expected Wilhelmina to ask for money and jewelry, but such an answer to the new relative was frankly surprised by the girl. What the guest has sought. Wilhelmina did not immediately set her rules. Although she has always been ready to defend her interests, which she has taught her life, now it is not time to discover her beasts and risk her position. If she now bends the stick, then she can simply leave it nominally the wife of the deceased duke, preventing it from actually resolving the issue. Therefore, you just need to accept the generosity of the Leighton house. This conversation could be completed. Wilhelmine rose from her place and was going to leave. Now she was going to visit small servants who worked in the laundry. The girl wondered why the washing machine had not been invented yet. Finally, the girl returned to the daughter-in-law and said she was very good and good. These words were very surprised by Helen, who did not expect words praise from her mother-in-law, but the girl said it was pure true. Wilhelmina realized that it was difficult for a girl from the noble family of aristocrats to treat the commoners from a poor family. But she did all this for the sake of family and her own family well-being. Helen stood a window around the window and followed something closely. The girl thought about her mother-in-law. She turned out to be very kind and sweet. After all, she took care of the servants and learned the names of all servants and the inhabitants of the estate in 2 days. Sometimes Wilhelmina could speak sharply, and her statements could be rude, but she is a real hidden behind social masks, which she has to wear in front of aristocrats and servants to maneuver. However, the kindness of the girl was still questioned. After all, she was able to navigate very quickly in the political situation and put herself properly after she learned that she was accepted for a kind. Although the origin of the girl was quite doubtful, she had a phenomenal ability to analyze information and successfully draw conclusions. And Wilhelmina studied political science, so she could intrigue. Helen thought that the person who studied political science could not be good just like that. Every step of her step was the desire to get as much as possible from the situation in which she found herself. Givicina thought about whether to use the butter. He arrived at the estate from the palace of the emperor. The same was well oriented in the political situation, but the man was actually soft and weak. But now it is worth returning to the real affairs, as a meeting with children is planned. However, it will have to be reduced from the planned one, as it has taken a long time to talk to Wilhelmine and reflect on it. The children were already running in the yard. They were waiting for a meeting with their mother. The girl asked her brother when her mother finally went down to them. Helen reminded herself that he had to talk to a nanny and ask for more to follow the children. The girl could not calm down after she was praised. After all, how could Wilhelmina conclude only after a brief acquaintance with her? Her view was full of wisdom and mind. Meanwhile, the new duchess mentioned the past life. For some reason, she remembered a conversation with one of the students about a book she really liked. The plot of the book was very similar to what happened to Vili. The woman then realized that she had reborn and got into the world of the novel. The student said that after the transfer, the hero knows exactly about the past of the person in whom he found himself. The same should be careful. But it also happens that the character changes dramatically history and learning. It impresses that it is born again and is revealed over time, covering individual details of its existence. The conversation with the girl, which was then escaped for about half an hour, has clarified much in the overall situation. But Wilhelmina thought she would prefer to be a teacher of history to navigate. She was very interested in how people behave at one time or another of their lives. Also important for it were aspects of culture, economy, work. After all, in this world, there were also those who were depressed and by whom they used. The girl's attitude to the servants surprised the servant itself. No one was so kind to them. Sometimes the orders of the young mistress were quite strange. Sometimes it was difficult to understand whether she decided to joke. Wilhelmina looked carefully at the group of boys, the oldest of which was only 10 years. The living conditions in this world were to be terrible if young children had to work to make money. Children from the aristocracy family were much easier. They could become knights or officials or even clergy. But for children from simple families, a difficult fate of the employee was prepared. Lieutenants treated the servants fairly loyal. What was happening in the houses of other nobles of Maozhen was only guessed. Meanwhile, to pick up work in children would mean to choose the last chance of existence. But this problem concerned not only the individual aristocrats, it depended on the entire social system, and anyone who took part in this was the culprit of the current situation. But you will not explain this to the children. One of the guys said Wilhelmini that she has a serious enough, but even moments, even a gloomy facial expression. What is very embarrassed by servants. After all, they cannot understand what is now in mind in the hostess. The girl hurried to reassure. Instead, she asked if the children had breakfast today, and whether or not one of them was getting sick. But the answer could be false, because the children were still a little afraid of the wife of the late duke. Wilhelmina asked if the baby wanted to kneel. The little one asked if you could do so, to which the girl replied that why not do anything like that? The same could cry and talk to her. The baby asked the lady if she was planning to stay in this house. Servants gossip that Wilhelmina may soon leave this house, and many people were very accustomed to her and only wanted her good. The Duchess thought that it was worth giving her High Highness immediately as soon as she saw her. After all, she owed his care to all that she had right now. But now it is worth returning to the present moment. Wilhelmina asked what plans for children today. The boy replied that the bad plants would go in the garden because if you run them, they would be harder to break out and they would be covered by the manager. Small also named that today they will be assisted by Yohohan. Servants with this name did not know before that, though she thought she knew everything. Even so, the boy praised Johann, considering him as a specialist. The servant said that Johann is usually hired by a gardener. Most often it happens in the summer and in the spring, and now in the fall he was difficult to live without work, so he agreed to help for a fee. But Johann did not get into his eyes to the owner because he was afraid of punishment. The boy believed that for the slightest guilt he would be punished very strictly, even can be beaten. So he did not happen to his eyes. Although many convinced him that the new lady was not, but the boy remembered the previous owner. And Johann has no parents at all, so he lives only with his own work. Wilhelmina remembered the glory of the past duke, and everything was perfectly understood. Suddenly she asked where John lives. Little said that the boy had a younger sister with whom they lived together, but only Johann worked. But they lived very poorly and often ate nothing but porridge from a tree bark. But the boy coped with work very well, and deserved good authority among peers and servants of the estate and his owners. The mistress thought about meeting this boy. After all, she still needs a person to perform his or her orders outside the house. The same Wiley asked to call her when Johann came. The young man ran in the garden. He did his job qualitatively, but thoughts all the time were spinning around the fact that aristocrats cannot be believed. After all, they considered such as he as a lower grade and did not consider people. The guy remembered the beatings that he had to tolerate after inadvertently smeared the owner's shoes with dirt. Then he felt that they were treated as if the wild beast, or even worse. Johann did not worry about his life. After all, he saw that the common man was very difficult to live in this world, and the next day could only mean new suffering. He was only worried about the fate of his younger sister. When he dies or perish at the hands of the nobles of the owners, Lily will have to go on his own life, and she is still very young and young for that. Responsibility for the sister gave little force to work. The young man saw a new host of the house sitting on the grass in the garden. He became interested in talking to her because everyone around them was told about her beauty and kindness of her soul. She may have been different than the owner. The closer the Johann came to the girl, the more he was surprised by her appearance. It was dressed simply, and something looked like a native of a lower state. The young man dared to speak to her. The young man bowed to a new lady. Wilhelmina examined his servant carefully. She saw that he was very young. He thought that the girl did not look like a nobleman, but the atmosphere around was quite strange. The mistress rose. She asked him whether his name is Johann. If so, she will be glad to get acquainted with him closer. The girl reported that much good heard about him from the boys. Wilhelmina asked if he would be very good with his duties. He also praised his wit and discussed his attitude towards his younger sister, for whom he was the only hope. The girl sat down in the young man. He was strange to him. Before that, he was only beaten and punished for the slightest mistake, and now the mistress is talking to him as if they are equal and friends. The girl was a pleasant smell. These were not the annoying, serious perfumes used by aristocrats and nobles. The smell was pleasant and natural. Johann thought he had heard him somewhere. Suddenly the girl asked if he loved potatoes. She suggested feeding him. The guy realized that the smell of the mistress reminded him of the times when the mother and grandmother were alive. Memories took him into the past. Wilhelmina held a pot in her hands. She asked if the young man could clean the potatoes on their own. If he cannot release it, then she is fine to help him and feed him even personally. The hostess returned to the palace. She thought about a conversation with a small one, which was quite simple and pleasant. Although the young man was too closed and cautious, and it was not fully closer to them. Although behind the experience of the teacher and the tutor, it did not come to the wall of distrust, but Johann wondered if he could still come to her, because he was pleased to spend time. The girl replied that of course. She added that she was walking the garden every morning. The next time she also promised to bring food for him and possibly his younger sister, so that she would also taste. Wilhelmina thought that he knew almost nothing about life outside the castle. The same Johann could become a source of invaluable knowledge of the outside world. At the same time, for the boy, it will be a good work. She was well aware that she was looking forward to the next meeting with him. A butler came to her from the main house. He asked how the young lady felt. He reported that he had brought a message from Helen. The man asked to forgive him in a hurry, but the matter is important and cannot tolerate and wait. He said that Mrs. Helen could not come on his own but asked to tell. This is already a great honor. Dvoretsky reported that a week later an official reception was held in honor of the war master and the border garrison master. Mrs. Helen cannot be present there, so it will be replaced by Wilhelmin. The man added that it was recommended by the Duchess. After all, the girl could really get used to the society of the Western nobility and to understand the political situation within the community of the nobles. The Bogretsky warned that she was not worried. Only the Duke will be close to the reception, and also the commander and his associates. The same nothing was wrong. Wilhelmini should help. But she realized that she still had no other way out, and the ball could be a step into the community of aristocrats. If it refuses, then there can be serious consequences. It can be assumed that she is even lucky. The girl gave her consent and asked to pass it to Helen. The butterfly worshipped and promised that in this case he would give orders to remove the measurements on the Duchess's dress. Finally, he said something more. The man advised to get acquainted with the rules of aristocratic families. After all, they differ from what the young mistress is used to. The girl realized that it was worth learning the manners and rules of etiquette. Wilhelmina herself did not mind it. She asked to send teachers no earlier than lunch. The Bogretsky asked why it happened. The girl replies that she just likes to sleep and relax for a long time. The Duchess of Viscount Rolana had a duchess. It was an old woman who had a very serious look and did not inspire people to get acquainted with her closer. Wilhelmina gathered with forces to study. But the woman was in fact a glory that she was the most famous manner and etiquette teacher in the Western lands. Many people think that the girl is just very lucky with a mentor. Vikunz was the author of a popular book that had to teach etiquette and the rules of behavior of young lady aristocrats. After the death of her husband, she decided to devote herself to learning and mentoring. The woman warned the girl that the training in this case will last 3 days. It will be a difficult test of the will and mind of the Duchess Leighton. After that, long hours of preparation and training went. After the introductory briefing on the manner of walking and holding on, the girl began to adopt the rules and experience of etiquette at the table. Wilhelmina was a fairly capable student. When the late night came, the girl falls on the bed without strength. She couldn't even think that being a housewife is so difficult and very tired. The day was tense and filled with new information. The next day, training began again. Vikun praised her student for endurance and peace, even when she made some mistakes. The behavior of the Duke's widow was perfect and confident. Wilhelmina, already in a dress that had been a real aristocracy, replied that she owes all this effort to the mentor, to which the woman replied which could not adjust certain points, but satisfied with the result. The Duchess herself thought that she would not even have a partner. You do not have to dance. She will accept greetings as a mistress of the house, sit at the table and all over. Finally, Viscountess Roland said she should tell about the rules of conduct of the lady on the debut among the nobles and aristocrats. But the girl noticed that the woman became pale and painful in appearance. Wilhelmina was asked to continue sitting if she did not need to stand standing. Then she took a mentor and led across the room to the sofa. The girl is really very grateful to the mentor. Then the Duchess filed a stone wrapped in the fabric. He was hot and had to help Madame Roland. The old had very cold hands, so it should warm them with a warm stone. Even during her studies, the girl noticed that the lady would very much freeze her hands. But etiquette and strict manners do not allow you to wear warm gloves. The same time has come to warm up and behave in human. Madame thanked the care. She decided that it was time to retreat from etiquette. But with the course of the conversation, the mentor realized that earlier this thing was used by servants from the Duchess himself. In the past life, Wilhelmina had to do different things and to take a variety of experience from other people and students. So now it will fully put it in practice. The Duchess told that when the autumn came, the children who were laundry began to complain that they were very cold. She sewed many gloves for kids. Madame Roland is surprised by kindness. The girl asked, "Isn't it an ordinary thing to be able to sew?" To which Madame replied that for aristocrats it is part of special education. She is surprised to find out this detail about her pet. In addition to all, the servant brought tea specially cooked for the guests. But then Wilhelmina released the servant and decided to serve her mentor. Madame Roland is surprised again. The girl insists that the woman drinks as much warm tea as possible so that he does not get sick. She sees that the mentor is freezing, because the climate in these lands is much cooler than in the capital of the empire. Wilhelmina became a woman. After all, she could not tolerate the cold, and believed that it was not necessary to make someone feel like that and suffer from it. The woman did not feel such care for a long time. She is amazed by the kindness and generosity of a girl who had recently lost her husband and almost was on the verge of losing her position in the Duke Lamont's family. The girl was full of charity. Madame Roland decided to tell you what conclusions she made about the girl and her success during these 3 days. She reported that the experience suggests that it could not be conveyed by the words of Marina and etiquette. Finally, the woman emphasized that she wants to pass on the experience and make aristocratic rails of those who will become a model of behavior for all nobles and aristocrats around. The example of Wilhelmina is therefore confirmation. And it was in the Duchess that the mentor saw what she sought to develop in other girls she taught manners and etiquette. But she cannot teach this, because it is not knowledge, but a way of thinking. Within 3 days of study, Madame Roland saw the potential in the girl and what the aristocrats had little from the noble ancient families. Wilhelmina, according to the mentor, owned everything you need. The same can be said that the training is already completing. After all, the mentor can give nothing to the girl. On the contrary, she learned in a young lady, so her soul suggests. Finally, the details of the Margrave reception became known. There will be 40 people in the event, which is very little like a person of this scale. The guest himself was a native of an ancient noble kind, similar to the Duke's genus. It was a mystery to the girl why such a person who became famous for military art and was considered the chief defender of the empire would be accepted in the presence of a very small number of guests. Wilhelmina also remembered the last conversation with Madame Roland. She told that the western lands were still in mourning, and that meant that no one really considered it. The Duke was not respected, and the girl herself was not in the target as much as they usually wear mourning dresses in these lands. The girl realized that the glory of the deceased man was not too popular, but for some reason she was sorry for Helen. The daughter-in-law kept, and she had to endure 5 previous wives of the Duke. The same woman had to give a sample caring mother-in-law and show her good attitude to Helen. But I doubted whether it was necessary to intervene. Wilhelmina went down to the guests. She saw the young Duke and thought that he was not at all like the head of the ancient Duke. The young man turned out to be much younger than the girl expected. The girl thought that they were gossiping about the origin of the Lenneton family from the imperial line, and Wilhelmina thought that her acquaintance with her son is happening only now. But most interested in how she would accept the stepmother, much younger than him, her stepson. Even in the modern world, it would not be very pleasant. The same girl expected condemnation from the young gentleman. But her fears did not come true. The young man approached her and worshipped. He wanted to take her hand and called her mother. His behavior did not indicate any deviations, to which the girl answered how pleased she is to meet. In general, this moment was reminiscent of a more situation when the elder represents a new student of the class than acquaintance with a relative. But the behavior of the young man was not forced, and no aggression was felt. Mikhail asked that the stepmother would forgive him because of her inappropriate reception. But the girl replied that he was constantly busy with important things all this time. The young man replied that he was waiting for it to get used to. He also added that the wife asked not to prepare a stepmother, which was only recently prepared for admission to the family. Wilhelmina believed that this could not be said, and then it seemed that Helen was accused. The girl was interesting to look at how he reacts for such politeness to a stepmother of simple origin. After all, the son of the glorious duke could not afford like that not to be ashamed. Such behavior could have been the reason for further raising of family affairs, and although the emperor himself tried to protect her, it was not necessary to give unnecessary reasons to break the backs of the family. But Mikhail did not know the similar. After all, he continued to talk to her just in his eyes, not ashamed that someone can see it. The young man may have been too naive. The son asked how the girl feels in the outbuilding. Wilhelmina replied that she has no discomfort. I am also grateful for the reception and hospitality. But the plans did not move to the main home. Michael said he would very much like her to move to the main house. He insisted that the stepmother was moving closer. Then all family members will be assembled in safety. The girl became embarrassed and tremecally when she thought of the close, constant presence of Helen nearby. But it will definitely not lose the opportunity to get something behind the mother-in-law who will live above the floor on them. Wilhelmin also realized that it could have caused future conflicts. Fortunately, Boretsky reported that the guest arrived. The girl was glad that it happened in a timely manner and released from an unpleasant conversation. Michael reached out to Machusi's hand and called her to meet the guest. It is her duty as the owner of the palace and the whole kind, and he will make her company. Today, it will become a replacement of Helen. Wilhelmine was awkward. It seemed to her that everyone was looking at her carefully and trying to find the smallest drawbacks in the girl's behavior. But she could not give up his obligation. Harold announced the arrival of Count Cherisel, Lord of the Lakelands. The guest stood before the Duke and his stepmother. The Earl reported that he was a great honor for him to be in this house of glorious Leighton. Mikhail asked how the path went. The girl thought that the son would sometimes overcome. The exchange of courtesy was successful and all were satisfied. The constant repetition of the prepared phrases tired. The girl thought that guests wanted to talk to her for the sake of clarifying the true position of the girl in the family. It was also interesting how her son would react to it, as he would treat her. Wilhelmine is now bored of all these aristocrats. She realized that she did not see much difference between ordinary people and nobles, and much of it is far-fetched. The last guest came in. It was Viscount Millis with her daughter. The girl immediately became sorry for the daughter of Viscount because she was dressed very inconvenient, and she could suffer from it and hurt herself. It was evident that the father is trying in every possible way to make the girl a very attractive prey for the audience young nobles and aristocrats. But it was already crossing all the borders and very much angry in Wilhelmin. Millis with her daughter appeared to the owners of the house. They worshipped Leiston. The girl was sorry for Mary because she was very difficult to lean in such a tight, close corset, and soon it had to give results. It happened irreparable. The girl almost fainted and dropped a little. After a while, she sat in the room and thought that she and her father sustained and her father before the eyes of a prominent duke. Wilhelmina made up the poor company. She wondered in little as she feels now. The woman showed her respect and pity. The same girl began to calm down and move away from the horror. But the Duchess, despite all the expectations of the girl, approached the guest and asked how she eats at all and what she had a daily routine. The girl's condition was very worried by Wilhelmin. She began to question. Maria became very pleasant from the fact that she became the subject of attention of such a lady. After all, she was good and really tried to enjoy and help the poor guest who received severe stress. Suddenly, the girl reported that she would take care of her guest personally. But Window began to deny, but Wilhelmina asked him not to interfere, but to enjoy the reception and communicate. Mikhail ordered the doctor to be invited to the rest room. He really liked with what kind of kindness and spirituality the stepmother answered in this case. The young man is simply impressed with the same thing he had not met before. However, the Duchess assured that the doctor would be superfluous. It is better to bring warm water and honey. The doctor was also a nobleman. The girl will not be able to relax and snatch everything that prevented her. Maria, meanwhile, thought that her guilt was torn. But the Duchess reassured her. After all, they congratulated their presence with a margrapher, and other guests should be made for conversations and entertainment. Wilhelmina poured tea to the cup. The girl looked carefully at her and realized that such a serious and harsh lady was so good and from understanding. The girl enjoyed sweet, delicious tea, but she refused to use it because it can be very much recovery. Wilhelmine tried to reassure her and rejoice her so that she would not think of nonsense. Mary was ashamed that she thus abuses the hospitality and kindness of the Duchess, but she reassured her. After all, she realized perfectly how the girl could now feel among the hall filled with guests. The two of them continued to sit in a rest room. The conversation was not glued. Wilhelmina was ready to talk, but the girl was wary. It was difficult for her to trust the stranger. Finally, the Duchess approached her. The woman was going to split the corset and weaken the pressure on Mary, but she asked not to do it, but Lady Leeton did it skillfully and very quickly. The girl was afraid. For a moment, it seemed to her that Lady Leeton had some secret preferences that she would prefer not to spread. But Wilhelmina only tried to weaken the corset and give the girl an extra opportunity to breathe freely. Mary became scary and ashamed. She believed that she could not afford such an appearance even if she was injured. God forbid that someone can see her in this form directly in the room. You could forget about marrying Hans then. Even no one knows what Lady Leeton is going on in her head. The Duchess could not be so good, but simply pursued her goals and satisfied her desire. The doubt dispersed the Duchess, who gave the girl to throw her own fur coat. Mary was hard to believe in such. The Duchess treated so seriously with her, the daughter of the usual little known window. Wilhelmina asked the girl not to worry. It should relax and drink medicinal tea. No one will go to this room, so Maria may not worry about this nonsense. The girl became easier. Maria realized that the Duchess did everything only for her comfort. Without a corset, it became easy to breathe, and in general, it became easier. Nothing restrained her movements, did not press it into the abdomen and back. Suddenly, the fear returned. All the time from a young age, the girl was splitting in the head that she should wear a corset because it seems thinner and more attractive. And now there was Hans in the next hall, her future promising bridegroom. Wilhelmina reassured the guest, saying that nothing wrong would happen if she lowered the pressure of the corset a little. She also does not tell from tea. It is worth relaxing and returning to the hall now. Mary did not dare to answer the Duchess, but not because of fear. Lady Leeton was fully right, and she spoke true things about resting and translating her spirit. The same must be enjoyed by freedom. The hostess of the house reported that she would offer one advice, but decide the girl herself. It was necessary to replace the corset with more free and convenient for it to avoid such misfortune in the future. The girl replied that this is the most new and most popular model, to which the Duchess answered, as if imitating someone else and copying the majority, "You will not be beautiful, and you can get problems." The mistress of the house asked, "Except the girl herself is convenient to walk in a tightened corset, and health is much more important than the dubious beauty achieved by such victims. But Mary is already grown, so he will choose for herself." Due to her youth, the girl did not fully realize what the Duchess of Lelleton meant, but despite everything she began to look at herself and find flaws. She began to return to the guests. Wilhelmine became very ashamed of her behavior. She realized that she did not really understand what fashion is now prevailing in her possession. The service only mentioned that they now love white skin. Suddenly the Duchess asked the girl if her stomach hurts. She replied that she did not complain, but Willy knew she was lying. After all, prolonged wearing of such a tight corset will lead to digestive problems. Maria is shocked on what topic they will talk now, but the Duchess assured that it was more ashamed to vomit for a reception among noble guests. The girl thought about these words. Wilhelmina said she was clear to the girl's desire to be beautiful and fascinate everyone around the guys. But it is not necessary to risk your health for ephemeral happiness. Maria replied that her father himself often hints at her to be thinner. What the Duchess asked is the girl going to marry her father. Otherwise, his opinion is so important. Wilhelmina asked that the groom girl was talking about this, but she replied that they did not know. They did not talk about it. Leylaton asked if Hans could love more lush and more full girls. The Duchess said that it is impossible to treat herself. First of all, the health and well-being of the girl herself should be, and then everything else. And she will live with the bridegroom. It is worth knowing what he thinks. Maria told history from her past. Then all the girls around the new fashioned corsets, and she could not wear them because she was full. As a result, no one paid attention to her at the ball. The same Duchess asked if someone had told her something about it. The girl thought she couldn't remember anything like that, but suddenly she remembered the words of guests present at that evening, their conversation. Then they said that she is a provincial nobleman who knows nothing about the rules of behavior at the ball. Everyone also drew attention to the fact that it was burning directly among the banquet, and looked like a pig. Since then, the girl has borne a certain phobia regarding her appearance and fear of condemnation by other girls and boys. The same Mary began to monitor her appearance as possible and adhere to diets. That evening left a footprint in her life. The girl began to get nailed at night, and when she wore high-heeled shoes, her legs were ruthlessly hurt, and she could not do anything more with it. But her desire was stronger. Maria tried to prove to everyone around them that their thoughts were in vain and wrong that evening. The girl decided to sacrifice her mental and physical condition for the approval of others. Maria was awkward to tell all an unknown person, but after that ball and today's reception where she was ashamed, she became very difficult in her soul, and she felt full of fool. The Duchess asked whether the girl had put so many prohibitions and taboos on food and drinks. Maria said she also considered it very nasty, but Leylaton herself did not consider it at all. The woman did not think that the desire to eat normally something bad. She also made a number of arguments that indicated that Maria acted in a similar way after an injury after a failed debut. The girl was glad that she received such a mental conversation and full support of her own position. The Duchess emphasized that Maria should live here and now and not pay attention to her opponents. The Duchess warned the girl that no one would know about their conversation, so she can speak her problem as much as possible. Maria became embarrassed by such sincerity and support. Wilhelmina assured that there was nothing wrong or unpleasant in the girl's behavior. It is worth living your own life, and no one pays attention to anyone. And the bride, if now with her, he loves her. The same Mary had the full right to eat what she wants and how much he wants, as he considers the right one. But the girl was not so ready to accept the Duchess's words at her case. The girl was grateful for the support. After a short conversation, Visconta had already tasted Lady Leighton's good tea. The girl stopped worrying about what could have thought about or what to say. She succeeded after some hesitation. The Duchess said that a teenage trauma was very different from the same injury received at a more mature age. Often, teenagers carry its burden throughout the next life to the very end. But it was not necessary to try immediately to get into the shower to such a child. It can only aggravate the overall situation. And in Willia now it was not possible to take advantage of his influence on adults. In this case, the child himself does not need teacher guidance or reading for wrong behavior. They need more support and assistance to someone who understands them and will not condemn them. So the girl and the Duchess were spoken almost to midnight. Maria realized that the reception would be over soon, and it is worth going home. Both were ready to listen to remarks from relatives and loved ones. Finally, Willie gave Mary herbs and honey, especially for her to prepare a special decoction for improving digestion and stomach. The girl thanked the Duchess for the evening and conversation. She also added that a lot, which she had even been afraid of thinking before, was as if today. Maria asked if she could still visit Lady Leighton. Wilhelmina asked herself if she could invite someone to visit, and whether these visits will be caused by aristocracy and nobles. However, she was sorry for the girl. Mary herself suddenly reminded that among the women of aristocrats, it was introduced to a range called evenings for guests, and to invite one she would like to see, that is, girlfriends, and approximately. The Duchess remembered an extreme conversation with her mentor. She advised to organize some interesting cultural leisure in the house. Other aristocrats and daughters of noble families could be invited. The girl then answered the woman that she did not like to read. However, she said that this is not necessary in this case. After all, the main goal will be communication and acquaintance, not reading literature. Madame Roland has recalled many times about how important it is to enlist the support of the allies. It was at such moments that the face of the Viscountess became an extremely serious expression, and it became really powerful. The woman has repeatedly reminded her that the society of nobles and aristocrats is very similar to the battlefield between two warring factions. But in fact, The warring parties can be much larger. So now Wilhelmina agreed. She reminded that she soon planned to start a literary circle, and that is where they and Maria can meet and talk without attracting unnecessary attention. The girl was very happy. She believed that such a dear lady invited her first to the circle, and therefore she would accurately arrive at the time. Maria said it was a very great honor for her and a respect for her face. Little promised nothing prematurely to speak to her father, and tonight she will say that she did not want to return to the hall with the guests. Willie thought that Viscount, on the contrary, would even be happy about such details. For the Duchess, this behavior was strange. After all, she did not do anything special, and the girl was such a pleasure and just shone, compared to what she arrived on the called evening. The same time went with benefit. Wilhelmina thought that Viscount was not really a very bad person who might seem at first glance. After all, a girl who was pure soul and thoughts loved her father and respected him. But to draw unambiguous conclusions about everything in this world, she was in no hurry. After all, relationships between people here are very surprisingly regulated by cultural and social norms, often despite the person himself. Wilhelmina asked the boy who served at the ball where the Duke is now. The little one replied that he is now with guests in the garden. Most likely they drink there and discuss the political situation. The girl decided that right now the second part of the solemn event was coming and the Margrave had to arrive. Then it is worth saying to the respectable guest, so that Helen would not be angry and not try to blame. Everything was not as easy as it seemed. The Duchess got lost in the estate. She regretted that she had not taken any of the servants. Now it seemed to her that she got lost in the garden of the palace, and she didn't know where to go. A lake appeared in front of her. It was beautiful in the moonlight of the night. The girl thought that nothing bad was going to happen if she stayed for a short moment to relax and enjoy beauty. Near the lake, she saw a huge, powerful position of a man with a beard. He put his hands on his chest and looked at the lake carefully in front of him. The Duchess was struck by the size of this aristocrat of the vest. Judging from its size, the girl concluded that he belonged to the state of warriors. Even the lesson clothes could not hide from the inexperienced eye. He was about 60 years old. Wilhelmine also thought it was a Margrave himself. He arrived in the last because she did not see it in the hall for the guests, and the last guests at her were Viscount Millis with her daughter Maria. The Duchess had already wanted to get congratulated with the guest, as she noticed that there was another person behind the tree under which he stood. Another stranger was in a helmet. His face could not be seen. Will immediately wondered who could be the companion of Margrave, with whom he spoke accurately but very quietly. Clothing on a mysterious stranger and patterns on him spoke in him a native from the east. Information on whom the governor of Borderlands communicated was very valuable, considering that they spoke clearly secretly, and a stranger did not want someone to see his face. The girl came closer to hear what these two talk about. She heard the Margrave as a friend, whether his friend wanted to see someone. It was about a woman. He replied that it was not timely. The commander of the border asked the man when the time would come, and whether that strange collection of poems is being stopped. The Margrave advised to consult a similar obsession with a doctor. He would accurately help. Will heard the commander that he had read the collection, and he did not impress him. He wrote him exactly the loser on the love front. The girl became embarrassed by the fact that she now eavesdropped other people's conversation. This conversation, in her opinion, was very strange to two healthy, powerful men. But just so, she could not go right now. Now she decided that it was worth going before they would complete the conversation. Wilhelmina tried to get out of the garden quietly so that no one saw it. The branch cracked under the foot, and the experienced military immediately noticed a girl who still wanted to believe that she would disappear suddenly and would be secret. The man asked that she was probably a great duchess, so it is time to finally say hello. He was called Margrave Essen. He was a little excited, and Willie realized that she prevented an important conversation. She replied that she was pleased to meet him. They were approached by a stranger in a helmet. He looked silently at the girl who was caught for the conversation. It is scary to imagine what he thought now. There were legends about this man. He was considered the most masterful sword in the western lands. From the Margrave there was a powerful aura, which the girl never felt from anyone in her life. But even more of her now was interested in the stranger next to him. He spoke constantly and without a break before that, and now a statue was shaken and silently looks at her from under his deaf helmet. Wilhelmina thought whether a stranger was breathing at all. But it would not be culturally silent. She said that she was awkward for her absence, but she had a very respectful and good reason. The man replied that he had already been told, but he personally believed that the organizer of the event was to do this, but by no means a large duchess and housewife, whose place is among the guests and invitees. The girl thanked the understanding. She dared to ask the Margrave who was next to him, and whether their husband would be introduced, once they were now in the same company. But the military did not want to reveal his identity. It seemed to her that the Margrave wanted to hide this weirdo. He evaded direct questions, but was not ready to reveal his secret companion. Wilhelmina decided to leave to drink. She thought that she did not need unnecessary problems, and now it is time to return to the house, as the solemn feast and a guest will begin. The commander replied that he was not against such a proposal. Although the man added that he does not consume alcohol, it is not opposed to compose the company. Willie was surprised that the military was not drinking alcohol, but the Margrave seemed to have guessed that his wife asked him. Wilhelmina was surprised that such a harsh man was so scared and changed on his face when the language went to his beloved wife. He asked if the Duchess joined him. Margrave added that the Duke had tried to find it before. The girl assured that he would explain everything at the meeting. The next part of the guest was only for the close ones, so she was definitely not a place. The atmosphere has changed. The Margrave was reflected to the girl and reported that in this case he would go. He also added that he would gladly spend it. But it may be late for a reception that would not be good on his part. And finally, he stopped her. The man asked to forgive him for a strange question, but he was interested in whether she had a relationship with other men. Willie seemed to be trying to trust her. She was getting rid of, and gathering with her forces, squeezed a smile and said that she was not interested in married men. Mark Grafer of Zagroff. He began to deny his intentions, which the Duchess could think of. The views of these two met. The guest proved to her that he loves only her wife very much, and would never even talk about the Duchess. She realized that she was manipulating her husband. The commander looked at his friend. He stood silently. The Margrave added that he heard that the Duchess was not a simple person, but I would never think that it is not so familiar and incomprehensible. The military asked if the girl studied at the academy. She confirmed a guess, and Esso asked how she would react if some who were also studying there wanted to meet her now. The girl immediately thought who the stranger could be. Could they once meet their Alma, mother? But it was something on the face of fiction. Such just could not be. For some reason, this issue reminded her of how they recruit religious communities and sects. She also replied that she was not going to do anything like that. She surprised again a powerful, fearless warrior and commander. The man is already tired of this conversation. He seriously turned to her and asked not to joke about him, but to treat his question quite seriously, because much depended on him in his and her life. Villa replied that she had no romantic relationship with the boys at the academy. She had some good close friends she had not communicated with for a long time, since the release of the academy. This was not surprising in her opinion, because she immediately began to look for a job, and they belonged to the nobility, and just returned to their parents' homes to live without anxiety and problems. The Duchess assured the man that she had no before or after a romantic relationship with men. Even no one confessed to something. The Margrave was very surprised, but he could not confuse her with anyone. He still thought about her answer. The stranger stood behind. The Margrave thought that she had such behavior as if a girl was trusting, but her proposal was rejected, after which she hardly believed someone. The guest was very surprised by the fact that she denied any fact of love confessions and romantic relationships. For some reason, he looks very concerned, but it could not be so interested in Willie's romance. The girl herself said that she really expected confessions in love many times, and felt quite confident in this regard, but it happened that no one dared. Or she was confident. Finally, the moment is when this conversation is worth it. The farther they said, the more misunderstandings arose between them. Wilhelmine had already regretted that she dared to listen to them. After the Duchess remained alone, she was able to think that a stranger in a helmet was constantly following her. From his clever eyes, the girl's smallest reaction did not hide. But Willie guessed that the reason for her attention and all the statements of Margrave could be that she was a mother, in law, younger than her daughter, in law and her foster son. Then everything is clear. Wilhelmine saw two children sitting on the stairs to the house. They actively discussed something. When she called them, the couple fell silent and looked at her carefully, stinging the continuation. The girl ran to the Duchess with joy, began to hug her. The girl was very glad that the older housewife returned. both servants were clearly satisfied with finding their mistress. They reported that they were very worried when it became late and Willie was still not home. Sister Anna worried that something could have happened to the Duchess, or she could just get lost in the garden. Wilhelmina reassured them and said that everything was fine, and now they would return to the outbuilding and will rest after a hard day. The girl was still amazed at how a good attitude towards a person changes them. The Trinity went to the house. Little said that today the Duchess was very good. It is clear that she is a nobleman and aristocrat. The senior tried to explain that she should remain silent more. And only now did the girl think that Helia has really made a lot of efforts to make the reception at the highest level. After all, she insisted on creating such a dress, and the preciousness is very beautiful. This felt pride in the Duke's genus to which Helen belonged. After all, she did not want to spoil the reputation of the genus without giving her mother-in-law of normal clothing and normal jewelry for such an important evening. However, the little service said that the dress was here. After all, the Duchess itself is very good. She could also be the most beautiful in the evening today. The girl compared her with a star in the sky. The Duchess decided to thank the girls for his kindness. She stressed that they would now enter her room and drink warm milk or tea. Anna did not expect the lady to invite the servants to tea. Wilhelmina thought that the castle was beautiful, and the room where the ball took place was very rich and beautiful, but she liked the most where she lived all this time. The Outleibel became her native place. Meanwhile, the Margrave was garden with his strange companion. The commander asked him if he was going through. The stranger honestly replied that he was very nervous. He would not prevent him from taking. Esson thought about what a strange thing to do. After all, now a man who forced himself to bow and fear his 1,000 enemies was afraid of meeting with one woman whom he simply goddery and loved above all. The Margrave proposed to remove the helmet and say hello as normal people do. He replied that he was not preparing for the meeting, so this option is an exception. The warlord just smiled. In the meantime, the guest thought that no matter how things really were, Wilhelmine lives quite well in this estate. She was not like the one that suffered from family conflicts. The impression was on the contrary. The man reminded a friend that she was grateful for his help at a critical time, but it is impossible to leave his post for a long time, which is very important, and on which the fate of hundreds of thousands of people of the empire depends. The stranger removed her helmet. He thanked for his care and advice, but he was going to act as he sees fit. The guest was a beautiful, dark-haired young man with a deep, careful look of the curious eyes. The silence prevailed. The Margrave replied that in this state it is not very difficult to come to such an event. Jake is very angry. The young man laughed. He added that otherwise it was simply impossible to act. The guest said that he was invited here, and he did not mind to meet the Duke Leighton under official conditions, which was already waiting for all invited. The friend replied that in this case he was returning. The young man added that he arrived to greet the Count, not to spoil the relationship with the aristocrats present. That's where their conversation had to end, and the stranger is taken away, despite the possible joy of the Duke. The Margrave worshipped. He said he would not mind drinking with his friend, but more important things were more important. Finally, the stranger asked to check in what conditions a mysterious woman lives and to report to him. The next morning, Willie talked to the boy. They discussed the trading guild, which would be the most profitable work. Small assured that they had everything necessary for a successful business. Wilhelmina thought about the proposal. The company only recently received a status that allowed it to trade with the noble families of the empire. For the poverty of the office, one product was carried, and for the aristocrats, another. The girl remembered a conversation from the past life when the student explained her reasons for why he needed to make money in the world of a Fenetry novel in order to have independence and resources. Wilhelmina thought that she now enjoys the support of the Lenneton family, but who knows how things would be in the future, and whether they would expel it, changing his mind to give a title and take it to the family. Wilhelmina realized that thoughts about getting rich at the expense of knowledge from past life are now absolutely not viable. In applied science, she felt complete profane and illness. The Duchess is now interested in details about the company itself and the people who agreed to work with or trade with it. The guy said that he personally knew one girl who is called Jane, and she sells salt and flour. It was an extraordinary girl because she had a lot of ambitions. She constantly came up with new advertising slogans to sell more torments and sometimes staged free sugar tastings for advertising. The head office was angry with such writings. because such tastings were very expensive campaign. What Jane was very offended by the management and refused trade. This sales have declined. The Duchess realized that she found the perfect candidate. Bold and determined, she will be exactly a good merchant on her side. The girl will help Jane financially and will work on her. Wilhelmina felt a good manager. After all, Jane found and successfully hired Jahan. The boy was a faithful and devoted follower of Her Highness of the Duchess in business. Willie thought that she could not come up with anything, but if you combine knowledge from her world and the local technology, then something had something to come out. The girl asked to pass a special letter for Jane. In words, she asked to convey merchants that she would like to talk to her during the meeting. The little one replied that it would be difficult, but he would definitely undertake the orders of the young lady. He starred, because he thought he said something extra, but Wilhelmina reassured him. She called him a capable boy. The little one replied that he would be better involved in the garden, to which the Duchess suggested help. The boy did not understand whether it was true, or that was a joke. In fact, she needed to see Helen to discuss important issues, but she has been summoned in the morning. Willie guessed the content of the conversation. She had already walked the palace hall, and thought that from yesterday evening you could tell the Duchess, and that it should be hidden. She considered the main thing for herself to take the conversation from Mary and with her related. Wilhelmina herself could be a topic for conversations and gossip. After all, she was much younger than her daughter, in law, and it could definitely not be left behind in the nobility and aristocracy. Michael and Helen met her in the room. The boy was glad because the stepmother finally arrived. He asked her to sit because the conversation promised to be long. But nothing wrong. They have not spent time together for a long time. The young man suggested becoming a torture, and at the same time asked his wife to make a simpler facial expression, because they are just going to talk, but in no case quarrel or do problems. Michael began the conversation first. He asked what tea he would drink. Willie surprised such a question because she was not used to the son of the Duke personally served her and prepared tea. The girl remembered the story of the student about the plot features of such novels. They do not have to be a thief or bad antagonist in them. It can be the person they avoid. The kindness and good attitude to Wilhelmina clearly did not like Helen, who began to be angry without hiding it. Machusi had to come up with something to avoid conflict. She has already agreed that she would not be able to avoid such a character. For some reason, this Simple was extremely angry with her disorder with his wife, which could affect the Duchess. But at the same time, Wilhelmina's doubts about the fact that something dark and treacherous was hiding inside the guy. The girl changed her mind to blame him for something. He was just simple. The young man gave the impression of a straight line and a little fool. He did not perceive any hints, but could simply outline everything he thought or said before that with another person. It is still worth becoming aware. But most of all, she was taking her side in any conflict that had arisen in them. It had a very stupid look from the outside, and forced to be angry Helen, what did not need to do. For Wilhelmina, such a situation was not desirable, so it was forced to take measures to reassure the daughter, in law. The stepmother said she had long considered it necessary to talk in detail on the family. Willie said she had been disturbed by their relationship. Miko replied that they were going to move to the next wing, but the Duchess assured that it is not necessary to move and move. It would be superfluous. These words led to the fact that Helen relaxed a little. It was hard to believe, but the girl was probably afraid of her mother, in law, considering her a competitor. After all, in this world much could have happened. They also started discussing how often they can communicate. The Duchess assured that you could just exchange letters, to which Mikhail replied that it was not necessary to do it. He insisted that from time to time it was necessary to make family gatherings and evenings so as not to lose the proximity that began to form between them. These words seemed to the girl very strange and inappropriate. Helen intervened in the conversation. She asked for a moment of attention because she wanted to talk to her mother, in law, about a recent reception. It clearly became a young man who would like to avoid talking about this case, but failed. The girl gave a hint that her husband is now an extra character, and she wanted to talk to the Duchess alone. He agreed and ordered not to quarrel under any circumstances. Wilhelmina was evil and angry. Helen started a conversation with a barely Maria Viscount Milles. The Duchess said it was a little trouble, but Helen assured that because of this, the girl was not present at the reception of guests in her home. The Duchess felt guilty, but did not think it was the case when it was necessary to lift a noise because of it. Instead, the daughter-in-law stretched her envelope. It had a stamp seal. The message was not open. Michael came. Wilhelmina asked what was in this letter. Usually such letters are checked before handing the addressee. But now there was a unique situation that was not part of the frame. Helen said after a moment she considers the actions of mother-in-law correct. After all, for the girl it was the first exit into the world, and so she was very aligned. Thanks to Wilhelmine about the Duke's house, good glory has gone. The girl emphasized that also a bad tone was the absence of a housewife at a dinner. Michael tried to protect her stepmother, but she asked her to be silent until the daughter-in-law arranged. Helen emphasized that despite all the troubles, her mother-in-law had to prepare the next reception. For Wilhelmina, it was a very unusual request. She did not expect him. The daughter-in-law confirmed her words. She stressed that the reception would be honored in honor of the knights who cherished the border and in honor of the same Margrave of Essen. The past score was dedicated to him, and now he will be honored for his soldiers. Wilhelmina realized that last time many could think that the absence of a mistress was a sign of disrespect. And this time the daughter-in-law gives her the opportunity to rehabilitate after the last failure at the dinner. This time you can definitely not give up. This will also allow you to stop gossip in society as the Duchess of the Widow treats the aristocracy and nobles on its lands, and how it will rule. Wilhelmina agreed. She said she was a good chance for her to correct the mistake of the past and get the opportunity to understand the political situation in her possession. Helen said she would inform the details later. Finally, Michael reached the word. It seemed that he was not at all by the issue of organization in his possessions. Instead, he ordered the servants to carry tea and sweets. His behavior was a minimum strange. Again, Michael began to serve his wife and stepmother on his own, which caused a new attack of anger in his wife. Willie could not believe that it was so easy to treat his wife and ignore her. Wilhelmina drank tea and thought that in the future, Mischli could be very expensive. Although he was considered the head of the genus, the decision was made by a fair wife.